I spent the $319 and I got a phone call from a guy who said, "Hey, I'm looking at your ad. What do you got?" And he was kind of rude. And I told him what I got. And he said, "You're one of those scummy wholesalers." And he proceeded to, over the next 2.5 to 3 minutes, berate me and tell me how stupid I was, how bad of an investor I was, how I was never going to be successful, how everything under the sun was wrong. And I was brand new. I could have taken that call and I could have believed it. But instead, I listened to him. At the end of it, I said, "Well, it sounds like we're not going to do business together." So I ignored this guy and I made $6,000 on that particular deal. Hey, welcome. My name is Rob Swanson, and this is the Real Estate Mogul Show Q&A session. These are the sessions where my team and I take your questions and we try to answer them live. So we're going to be diving into a series of things over the next few minutes and get you the information and the answers to the things that are pressing on your mind. I've been investing in real estate for over 25 years. I've invested in over 20 different states, 30 different cities all across the country. So when it comes to generating leads, closing real estate deals, and just about every kind of deal under the sun you can think of, I've probably closed it and can think back recently or years ago to some address, some property, somewhere that can answer the question. So with that, let's dive into today's show. I think we've got a series of questions that have been coming in, and let's just jump to number one.
All right, question number one from Tarian. Hi, Rob. I don't feel like there's anything holding me back except myself and taking consistent action when it comes to creative. I would like to know what creative options work best for the homeowner scenarios. I have friends that are realtors that can send me potential deals, but I don't have anyone that buys on market deals from wholesalers, and I don't know what I need to tell the realtor to include in the contract if they accept the offer.
Whoa, Charian, that was like 8 questions all in one. So let's back up to the beginning. I think what Tarian said was there was nothing holding him back, except a lot of things that are holding him back. So we're going to dive in and we're going to break these down. So the first thing is, he said nothing's holding him back except the creative. And the first big question, I think, was, what are the creative real estate strategies that can be utilized to solve homeowner problems? And so let's break it into the big picture buckets first. So when you're a real estate investor, your number one goal is to solve someone's problem by buying their real estate. Sometimes their problem has nothing to do necessarily with the real estate itself, but the real estate is either dragging them down, it's causing a problem, or it's an asset that they could sell to free up cash to solve their other problem. And so you have to, number one, sort of ask yourself, what problem does the seller have? What are we trying to actually do here? And so if I look at the 2 big buckets, let's not get into traditional offers and creative offers. Let's just say that you have cash offers, you have terms offers, and you have hybrid offers. And so let's talk about each one of these 3. Cash offers are the seller is going to get all of their cash at closing. And so a cash offer is generally a short, quick close at a significantly reduced price. Because look, here's the reality. Years ago, I was ski patrol in the Colorado mountains here. And one of the things that we learn in ski patrol, in any sort of first responder scenario, is you don't rush in and create 2 casualties when there could just be 1. You don't put yourself in serious harm's way, or you don't put yourself in a no-win situation if you don't have to. And so it's the same thing as a real estate investor. The seller has a problem. You have solutions, but you're not trying to take on their problem and have two people end up with trouble instead of just one. So you have all cash offers. Cash offers are made with shorter close periods and significantly discounted prices. Now, the problem that you typically solve there is the seller needs to get out from underneath the house. The seller doesn't have the cash to make repairs. There's usually some sort of distress in the property itself with an all cash offer. Now, let me clarify all cash offer as well. All cash doesn't mean that you have to take $10 bills out of your pocket and lay them down as cash. A cash offer could be financed, okay? The key piece of making an offer that is all cash is disclosing how you're going to bring the cash to the table. If it's all cash at a discount and you're going to bring cash to the table, that's perfectly fine. If you're going to finance it with hard money, private money, traditional financing, it's still a cash offer because it's cash at closing to the seller. You just simply disclose where the cash is coming from, and then in your offer agreement, everybody's on the same page. Cash offers. Let's talk about terms offers. This is what people talk about, the creative terms and hybrid. Terms offers are when a seller doesn't need all of their cash up front, and in some cases, the seller is looking for taking payments over time. Oftentimes in a terms offer, price is more important than cash. They want to sell at a certain price and they don't need all of their cash up front today. They're willing to take their cash in payments over time because price matters most. They're also oftentimes thinking about speed. They just don't want the hassle of the deal anymore. I think of terms offers in kind of those three buckets then. When a seller is really stuck on price, I'll bring out a terms offer. When a seller is willing to take payments over time, I'll bring out a terms offer. When a seller has little to no equity and a cash offer doesn't work, they're not behind on payments, so there's not going to be a short sale. The bank, if they owe something, is not going to discount the note, so your cash offer doesn't work. And yet the seller still would like to get rid of the burden of dealing with the house. And that's when a terms offer can come into play. So again, you're looking for what problem am I trying to solve that the seller is experiencing. And maybe they're tired of dealing with the tenants. Maybe a spouse or a partner or someone passed away and they just don't want to be thinking about the real estate anymore. They want to sell the real estate. Their partner took care of the property. Now the burden is on them. They want to be done, but they like the cash flow. The cash flow from the property has been good. A terms offer is a fantastic scenario for you to take on the responsibility of doing the real estate deal and keep the cash flow going to them. This is exactly how I bought my hangar, which is, we're going to move to the third scenario, which is a hybrid. A hybrid is a combination of a cash and a terms offer. The seller gets some cash at closing, but not all of the cash. They get some cash at closing and then payments over time. And so for the balance. And so the hybrid scenario takes the first two, which is all cash, no cash, and then some cash, and breaks those three scenarios together. It's how I bought my hangar. We were in a very competitive real estate market in the aviation community, and hangars are in high demand. You know, if you get onto the wait list to try to get a hangar, it's a 5 to 7 year wait list at the local airport that I fly out of. And I was thinking, that's not going to work for me. I need to buy a hangar fast because I'm taking delivery of a new airplane and I need to get it into a hangar. And so through a series of guerrilla marketing and talking to people, I got a referral lead. I picked up the phone, I called the guy, and I ended up just asking him why he's interested in selling. If you've listened to any of my answers to questions, you'll notice that I'm always looking for an interested seller first, and then I'm looking for their motivation second. Number one, I want to know, does the seller want to sell? If the seller is interested in selling, then we can dive into the motivation that might lead them to a cash, a terms, or a hybrid offer. And that's the process that we go through. We've got to get on the phone. So I got on the phone with this guy, and I found out that a hybrid offer worked. I simply asked him this question. I said, hey, great hangar, good location. Why are you interested in selling? And he said, well, I'm interested in selling because I've moved out of state. I've rented the hangar. I've got a deadbeat tenant in there that's not paying. I'm in the middle of an eviction. I'm dealing with all of this. I don't really want to sell because when I was collecting rent, it was great cash flow, but I'm kind of tired of dealing with it. And I replied and I said, well, let me ask you a question. If I could buy the hangar right now and take on the responsibility of dealing with the deadbeat tenant, is that something that you would be interested in selling? And he said, yeah, I didn't know that I could. I thought I had to deal with it and then get the hangar clean and then sell it. I said, no, I could buy it. I'll buy it as is, and I'll take on the responsibility of dealing with the eviction. And he said, okay, yeah, that would work. And I said, well, let me ask you this. You mentioned that you liked the cash flow. What if we structured an offer that allowed you to keep the same cash flow that you've been getting as a landlord renting the hangar, but you had no responsibility for management as a landlord? Would you be interested in financing the purchase? And he said, like me being the bank? And I said, yeah. Would you just, instead of taking all of your cash up front, would you take your cash over time? And he said, I never thought about that. Yeah, I probably would do that. And he said, but I've got this project over here that I'm working on that I was thinking about selling the hangar and taking the cash and going and doing something on this project. And I said, well, let me ask you, how much cash are you looking for? And he told me the number. And I said, well, why don't we do this? I said, this is the cool thing about real estate investing. I have a need, you have a problem, and you're trying to get cash for something. Why don't we structure it in a hybrid kind of way? I'll give you some cash at closing, and then you just become the bank for the balance, and I'll pay you the same amount that you've been getting in rent over time until I pay the hangar off. I said, would that work for you? He goes, man, that'd be great. I closed 5 days later and moved my airplane into the hangar. Now I'm going to back up and give you one more answer. I had to solve the deadbeat tenant problem. And so I called the deadbeat tenant, and I essentially did cash for keys. And it was $1,000 cash if you were out of the hangar with a broom-swept concrete floor Saturday morning. And that's exactly what I got. The deadbeat tenant signed the lease termination agreement, gave me the hangar, broom swept clean. I moved my airplane in, closed on the deal. Everybody was happy. All cash, no cash, and some cash. Those are your basic real estate structures. Creative, I like lease options in some states. I like contract for deed. I like buying with owner financing. With equity, I like buying subject to. I personally don't do a lot of subject to deals. I think they're high risk. I think they're high exposure. Personal preference. Years ago, I did a ton of them. Today, I do none of them. I structure something else. I want the seller's loan paid off. And again, that's a personal risk evaluation based on what I've got today or what I want exposed out there in the world. And so that's the creative answer, Terrian, that hopefully that was a longer, more in-depth answer than you were even looking for. So let's jump to the next thing, which let's see, Trevor, you flashed this up on my screen here. So let me look at this. The next one was about finding or realtor friends bringing potential deals. But he doesn't have anyone that buys on-market deals from wholesalers. So setting up the wholesaler scenario. Well, here's what I'll tell you. I have wholesaled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deals off the MLS. Generally, here's the key. You've got to resell the property at a significant discount from the listing price itself. Then you also have to find people that are actively buying. See, a good investor, somebody who gets it, they don't care if it's listed on the MLS or not. They want to look at the price. They're looking for a deal, okay? They don't care if it's on market or off market. They don't care. Does the price work for their model? They'll buy it. And there are investors that look at the price of an on-market deal that's trying to be wholesaled and said, hey, it's listed for $100,000 and you're trying to sell it to me for $105,000. Well, the maximum allowable offer or the wholesale price is actually $125,000, so I'm still giving you a $20,000 great deal. It's just that I got to the deal on market faster than you did. And so if you want the deal, I can get you the deal. A really good investor doesn't care. They don't care that they're paying a $5,000 premium off the list price because they're still buying a significant discount from the value. That's what a value investor looks for. And it just so happened that you were quicker to the punch to get the deal locked up, to find the opportunity. This is an opportunity that they don't have without you. They weren't making the offer. They weren't looking at the MLS. They weren't tracking the offers and the price drops and the various things. You were. And so you should and can get paid for that effort. Okay, here's the thing. You need to just go find real buyers. End of story. Your problem here is you can have friends bring you great deals, but you don't have anybody to buy them, so then go solve the actual problem. Go get a great deal, right? There's the old adage, find it and they will come, build it and they will come. Go find a great deal, the cash will show up. You might have to talk to 3, 5, 7, 9, 28 people before they say, yeah, I'm in, but you'll find them. I'll tell you a quick story. One of the first houses I wholesaled on South Raleigh Street here in Denver, 28 years ago, a long time ago, okay? Before the cell phone, we actually had a cell phone, but it was a flip phone. And before software, before CRMs, before any of the fancy tools that make real estate investing so easy today. Years ago, one of these first deals, got it under contract on the MLS. Made an offer. They accepted the offer. I was under contract. I went and I ran an ad in the Denver Post. Cost me $319 to run a classified ad Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Think about that. $319 to run a classified ad in the newspaper for 3 days. Okay? Then my ad was gone. Print newspaper, 3 days, $319. And I hear people complain about spending how much money they have to spend on technology today to have access to everything that they have access to for $97 a month. Crazy. I spent the $319 and I got a phone call. And this phone call was from a guy who said, hey, I'm looking at your ad. What do you got? And he was kind of rude. And I told him what I got. And he said, you're one of those scummy wholesalers. And he proceeded to, over the next 2.5 to 3 minutes, berate me and tell me how stupid I was, how bad of an investor I was, how I was never going to be successful, how what I was doing was illegal, how everything under the sun was wrong. And I was brand new. I could have taken that call and his beration of me, and I could have believed it. But instead, I listened to him, and I said, well, at the end of it, I said, well, John, it sounds like we're not going to do business together. And he's like, you're right. And then he hung up on me. My point in telling you the story is he was a buyer who claimed to buy real estate. I don't know if he actually did or not. Doesn't really matter. But he told me how everything I was doing was bad, illegal, and wrong. And I was unethical, unmoral, and un-everything. And the reality is I solved the seller's problem because that property had been sitting on the market for over 90 days. They were trying to sell. They couldn't sell because it was in such disrepair. The MLS tends to be a retail buyer's marketplace. And so when you find the distressed properties or the properties that need quick sale or the property that can't get financing or some scenario, there's a scenario that makes a property listed on the MLS very attractive. I happened to find that deal. So I ignored this guy and I made $6,000 on that particular deal. And so the reason I want you to hear the story is because you might have to go through 28 different people to find the buyer who says, yeah, bring me the deal. He goes, I don't care what you got it for. I don't care what your price is. And this is the way I handle somebody that says, well, it's listed on the MLS. I don't buy on-market properties and yada, yada, yada. Number one, they're not a real legit buyer because a legit buyer doesn't care where the deal comes from. Number two, when somebody says, hey, I see that it's listed for $100,000 on the MLS right now and you're trying to sell it to me for $105,000, and but you know that the wholesale price is $120,000, $125,000. And so I just asked him this. I said, well, let me ask you this. If I had the property for $1, would you pay for it? Would you buy it? And so people oftentimes come up with, you're making too much money. Well, what if it was listed for $100,000 and I got it for $1 and I was going to make $104,000 on that deal? Does my profit matter? Does the list price matter? What really matters here? What matters is what price are you getting the deal at as it relates to the value of the property. So there's two things on market that people complain about. I, as the wholesaler, am making too much money, or I am selling it over the MLS list price. Those two things don't matter. What matters is the connection between price and value. So focus on that and teach and educate your buyers that that's what matters to true, legit, successful real estate investors. Let's see. Let's jump into the next. I think we're going to hold the what should be in an offer for another time, unless we have time for it, Trevor. I don't know if we want to dive into other people's questions. There's a lot that we could talk about related to contract and what should be in the paperwork. Do we want to dive into that one now or move on to next questions?
I'm kind of two minds on this. Like
Okay.
we could just keep digging in and going for it on this, and then bump some questions into the next episode, or we could just go straight for a double header today.
We'll go for a double header. Let's do it. Okay, so we're going to dive in then, and we're going to answer the last part of the question from Terrian, which is, I don't know what I need to tell the realtor, my friends, my buddies, to put in the paperwork when I make the offer. Okay, two things. In the question, the word contract was used. I want you to think about when you're dealing with a seller direct. I want you to talk about paperwork over contracts. This is just a fundamental psychological thing that helps you get more deals. Because when you say, I'm going to send you the contract, what is most people's thought process? I need to send it to my lawyer. I need to send it to my brother who is a lawyer. I need to send it to my financial advisor. I need to send it to my CPA. I need to send it to Aunt Jane who lives in Tacoma, Washington, because her husband used to be married to his widowed wife who had a brother that was a lawyer. See how this works? So when you send a contract, you immediately make everybody think that we need to have lawyers look at it. When you send paperwork, what do you do with paperwork? You sign paperwork. Okay? So, contract, paperwork. Let's use the word paperwork. Okay, number one. Number two, let's dive into this. So, the fundamentals of contract law, we're not going to dive deep into. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer. I can't teach you contract law. I can't do your contracts for you. I'm probably smarter than most of the contract lawyers out there, but it's just I can't do it because I'm not licensed to do it. So let's leave that aside. Let's talk about the way I think about filling out the paperwork. I literally have filled out paperwork on the back of my truck's tailgate with a yellow notepad and a pen years ago before technology made it simple and e-signature, and I had no paperwork with me and I had a great deal. I literally wrote out the purchase agreement on a yellow notepad. Seller signed it. I gave it to the title company. They laughed at me and said, "You're a get her done kind of guy, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Okay, well, we can work with this." So you need to have the parties of the agreement, buyer's name, seller's name. You need to have the address of the property that you're dealing with. And then there's a couple of important terms that we start to think about. So earnest money. Okay, how much consideration are you going to put up at the time that or shortly after the purchase agreement is signed, the paperwork is signed? How much earnest money are you going to deposit to bind the contract? Okay, and this can range from $10 to $100 to $1,000 to $10,000 or more. In general, when I'm working directly with a seller, it has been rare in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deals directly with sellers over the last decade plus, rare that I put up more than $10. Now, if I'm buying on the MLS, if I'm buying an on-market property in the MLS, I'll generally put more because the listing agent will usually define what they're requesting from earnest money. But I want you to catch my word there. That's a request. It doesn't mean you have to do what they're asking. And so I have made offers that vary or change their requested earnest money to a different amount. So, earnest money. How much consideration are you going to put up to bind the agreement? Some states have rules on minimum consideration. Other states don't. Just understand the law in your state, and you can do it right. And that's as simple as going to your local real estate investor meeting and asking around. Hey, what's customary in this area if you don't know? It's also as simple as Googling it and finding out the answer, right? A little bit of research and you can figure it out. So consideration, $10 on up. Some of the next things that I think about that are really important is price and terms. So what price are you going to pay and how are you going to pay it? So the more creative the deal is, the more defined the terms have to be. But understand that your paperwork, your offer paperwork is setting up the framework for the offer. It's not all the legalese of all of the terms. It's just setting up, hey, here's what we're agreeing to do. I'm going to give you X price. I'm going to give you X dollars at closing. I'm going to give you X payments over X period of time. And so it can be relatively simple in how you define the terms of the offer, the price and the terms. So the parties to the agreement, the address, the consideration, the price and terms, what are you going to pay and how are you going to pay it? A really big important one comes next. I'm always thinking about liquidated damages or specific performance. What happens if I breach the agreement? Okay, what happens if I? So your liquidated damages and your specific performance is a clause, and what you want is you want liquidated damages. You want your earnest money deposit to be the liquidated damages, the damages that the seller receives if you breach the agreement, okay? Number one, don't breach the agreement. But number two, make sure that you get liquidated damages, not specific performance. What specific performance says in non-legal terms is the seller has the right to sue you and force you to close, or sue you and win damages from you if you don't perform on the agreement. So you want your non-performance to be limited to your earnest money deposit. And you do that by having liquidated damages as part of the terms of your agreement. Now, it's important to understand that when you're making an offer, you're making an offer with your best intention to close. And so you're not trying to do this to take a property off the market, see what works, and then just breach the agreement and give it back to the seller. That's not it. That's not what you're trying to do. But you are trying to limit your risk and your exposure in making an offer. I think it's also important at this point to just understand from a contract law standpoint, a real estate contract or an offer, the offer paperwork is what's known as a unilateral agreement. It's a unilateral contract. Here's what this means. It means that the seller must sell to you, but you are not obligated to buy from them. So the seller has to sell. Once they've signed the agreement, the seller must sell. But you have certain clauses in the paperwork to allow you to cancel the agreement and not buy. It's a unilateral contract. The seller must sell, you are not obligated to buy. So you then set up those things that allow you to do your due diligence and not buy. Because if the property, if something that the seller disclosed or something that you believed to be true when you made the offer turns out not to be true, in a unilateral agreement, you as the buyer, you can cancel that agreement, get your earnest money back, and move on to the next deal. No harm, no foul. So I always look for an inspection period or a walkthrough period, some period of time that gives you the ability to do the due diligence on condition, on location, on anything else related to the property itself, and you determining, does the price I offered and the terms I offered work long term? Is this going to be a good deal for me? You've got to give yourself a window of time to do that due diligence and determine, yes, it is. Once you get to the end of that due diligence period and beyond the due diligence period, and if you haven't in writing canceled the agreement, now you're moving on to close, okay? If inside of that window of time you cancel the agreement in writing, to the seller, to the title company, to the real estate agent. I CC and copy everybody involved in the deal. If I have to cancel an agreement, I get it out to everybody. Well, then we just cancel the paperwork and we move on to the next deal. So your inspection period or your walkthrough period is a critical piece to have in there because it gives you the out should you need the out. Now, one thing that I think about a lot, and I have in the paperwork that I use, is there's an inspection period a lot of times, and in an inspection in the real estate world is a specific thing. There are licensed inspectors. And so one of the things that I do is I make my due diligence time frame not solely based on inspection, because somebody that really wants to push you could argue that if you didn't hire an inspector, send them to the property and have it fully licensed inspected, that you didn't actually inspect the property, so you can't cancel the agreement based on an inspection that didn't happen. And so what I try to do is broaden my language and make it a walkthrough. It's my walkthrough due diligence of the property once we're under contract, once we have a signed offer. It's my walkthrough and my not inspection, but my evaluation. It's my walkthrough of the property in that period of time. I like to write my inspection periods in that way. It gives me a broader scope. Now, so we're going to move from inspection walkthrough down to another piece, which is clear and marketable title. So what this means is the seller is obligated to sell the property to you with clear title. This is the one area where the seller can get out of the purchase agreement or has obligation to remedy the title, i.e. by extending your contract close timeline. So one of the items in a purchase agreement is clear and marketable title. And what that means is if there is a lien, if there is a loan, if there is a title defect, a break in the chain of title, something has gone wrong, it's the seller's responsibility to remedy that. Now, sometimes that just takes time, and so what that can do is trigger an extension to the purchase agreement, to your closing date. But buying property with clear and marketable title is one of those items in the purchase agreement that is important. These are fairly standard things in most purchase agreements, okay? You just have to understand, and I'm skipping over a ton of things, right? But you have to understand the most important things are the things that I'm talking about. Earnest money, clear and marketable title, price and terms, walk-through period or inspection period. I like to put in there who's going to close the deal. I like to say, when we agree up front, either XYZ title company or XYZ attorney's office is going to close the real estate deal. I like to dictate who that's going to be. If I don't know who it's going to be, then I like to say that the buyer, me, shall select the closing agent within X number of days of signatures. And so I like to be in charge of who's going to close the deal because that helps me with my exit strategy, whether I'm going to wholesale the property or whether I'm going to fix and flip the property. If I'm going to fix and flip the property, the reason I like to control it is because I can always request what's called in some parts of the country a hold open, an open policy, where they'll hold the title insurance policy open for me while I go fix and flip the property, and I pay maybe a little bit of a premium on the front end, a 10% or so premium up front, and I get a significantly reduced fee to zero, or a significantly reduced fee on the back end when I resell it again. So I like to control the title company because it helps me control my title and my closing costs. And it also allows me to have more flexibility on my exit strategy when I have a relationship with that closing agent. Those are the main things. I could be missing something as I'm doing this off the cuff that's important, but those are the big items. What state law, whatever state you're doing the real estate deal in, is the state law that is going to kind of control the paperwork. Those are the thing, and then signatures. I use depending on my deal, I'll use a 1 to 2 page purchase agreement that has maybe 17 or so different paragraph items on it. We've talked here about 5 or 6 of them. The other things are generally contract law boilerplate things that are good to have in paperwork, like addressing e-signatures, digital signatures, or addressing separate signatures. And I'm forgetting what that's called right now off the top of my head, but where a signature could be on one piece of paper from one partner, one seller. A signature could be on another piece of paper. The same thing, but 2 separate agreements. Signatures, I'm totally blanking it out. But you could have the same purchase agreement signed by 2 different sellers. Both of their signatures don't have to be on one document. They can be on separate. Those are legal contract terms that you can put into your paperwork. But now we're starting to get into the stuff that most people don't really have to think about. Think about the things that I've talked about here, the big picture items, and a title company is going to help you correct anything that you did wrong. That's the beautiful part about this, is you don't have to be perfect. You have to learn how to ask questions, and you have to learn who you can ask to help you solve problems. And so if you did something wrong, ask your closing agent if they can help you remedy the situation. Sometimes it's easy for you to call the seller and say, hey, we need to fix this. We need new signatures. Sometimes I'll just ask the title rep, hey, would you call the seller and let them know that we need to update the signatures for the closing. And it depends on the relationship, the seller, just how is the deal going. Sometimes I'll do it. Sometimes I'll let someone else do it. All right, guys, so that's a wrap. Terrian, fantastic job. You got an entire episode with a 2-paragraph question that had like 8 questions baked inside of it. So fantastic job. Here's what I want you guys to do as we sign out on this one. Send an email to robswanson@freedomsoft.com, and we will answer your questions. Maybe you, too, can get an entire episode just like Terrian. Well, from here, we're going to dive into other questions in future episodes and answer everything off the cuff. So this is Rob Swanson. We'll see you in the next one.